All right, welcome. Today we are going to cover chapter number 10 from the book Trading in the Zone. We have already covered 9 chapters from this book, and the last chapter was Nature of Beliefs. And today we are going to understand about the impact of beliefs on trading, right? So, generally, we understood about what is belief system and how it is affected by the different external environment and effect. And thereafter, we learned about what is the nature of it, what is the logical reasoning behind creating a belief system and how it affects our internal system, which in turn changes our external system. All right, so let's begin without any further ado. So the name of the chapter is The Impact of Beliefs on Trading. If the external environment can express itself in an infinite combination of ways, then there is really no limit to the number and types of beliefs available to be acquired about the nature of our existence. That is an elaborate way of saying that there is a lot out there to be learned about. Yet, to make a general observation about the nature of humanity, I would say that we certainly don't live our lives in a manner that is consistent with that statement. Okay, if it's true that it's possible to believe almost anything, then why are we always arguing and fighting with each other? Why isn't it all right for all of us to express our lives in a way that reflects what we have learned to believe? There has to be something behind our relentless attempt to convince others of the validity of our beliefs and to deny the validity of theirs. Consider that every conflict, from the smallest to the largest, from the least to the most significant, whether between individuals, cultures, societies, or nation, is always the result of conflicting beliefs. What characteristics of our beliefs make us intolerant of divergent beliefs? In some cases, we are so intolerant that we are willing to kill each other to get our point across. My personal theory is that beliefs are not only structured energy but also energy that seems to be conscious, at least to the extent of having some degree of awareness. Otherwise, how can we account for our ability to recognize on the outside what is on the inside? How would we know our expectations are being fulfilled? How would we know when they are not? How would we know we are being confronted with information or circumstances that contradict what we believe? The only explanation I have is that each individual belief has to have some quality of either awareness or self awareness that causes it to function as it does. The idea of energy that has some degree of awareness may be difficult for many of you to accept, but there are several observations we can make about our individual and collective natures that support the possibility. First, everyone wants to be believed. It doesn't matter what the belief is, the experience of being believed feels good. I think these positive feelings are universal, meaning that they apply to everyone. Conversely, no one likes to be disbelieved. It doesn't feel good. If I said, I don't believe you, the negative feeling that would resonate throughout your body and mind is also universal. By the same token, none of us likes to have our beliefs changed or challenged. The challenge feels like an attack. Everyone, regardless of the belief, seems to respond in the same way. The typical response is to argue, defend ourselves, and depending on the situation, attack back. When expressing ourselves, we seem to like being listened to. If we sense our audience isn't paying attention, how does it feel? Not good. Again, I think this response is universal. Conversely, why it is so difficult to be a good listener? Because to be a good listener, we actually have to listen without thinking about how we are going to express ourselves. The moment we can either politely or rudely interrupt the person who's speaking. What's the compelling force behind our inability to listen without waiting to interrupt? Don't we like being with people with similar beliefs because it feels comfortable and secure? Don't we avoid people with dissimilar or conflicting beliefs because it feels uncomfortable or even threatening? The bottom line implication is the moment we acquire a belief, it seems to take on a life of its own, causing us to recognize and to be attracted to its likeness and repelled by anything that is opposite or contradictory. All right. Just give me 1 second. I'll have to take a note of it. Meanwhile, you can read the next few sentences and I'll be right back. Okay. Great. Now, moving ahead, the next thing is considering the vast number of divergent beliefs that exist. If these feelings of attraction or comfort and being repelled or threatened are universal, then each belief must somehow be conscious of its existence, and this conscious structured energy must behave in characteristic ways that are common to all of us. The primary characteristics of a belief. There are three basic characteristics you need to understand in order to effectively install the five fundamental truths about trading at a functional level in your in your mental environment, which in turn going to change your external environment and the results that you're seeking from trading or in general in your life, right? Beliefs. The first point, belief seems to take on a life of their own, and therefore resist any force that would alter their present form. All active beliefs demand expression. Beliefs keep on working regardless of whether or not we are consciously aware of their existence in our mental system or mental environment. Okay, they will keep on working. All right. Great. Now, the first one, let's go a little bit deeper into all these things. Okay. Let me just copy paste these important stuff first of all, and then we can go ahead. Fine. Mm, just give me 1 second. Okay. Now it's just fine. I guess. Let me add a text box and a counter. All right. Okay. Moving ahead. Beliefs resist any force that would alter their present form. We may not understand the underlying dynamics of how beliefs maintain their structural integrity, but we can observe that they do so even if in the face of extreme pressure or force. Throughout your human history, there are many examples of people whose belief in some issue or cause was so powerful that they chose to endure indignities, torture, and death rather than express themselves in a way that violated their beliefs. This is certainly a demonstration of how powerful beliefs can be and the degree to which they can resist any attempt to be altered or violated in the slightest way. Beliefs seem to be composed of a type of energy or force that naturally resist any other force that would cause them to exist in any form other than their n- you know present form. Does this mean that they can't be altered? Absolutely not. It just means that we have to understand how to work with them. Beliefs can be altered, but not in the way that most people may think. I believe that once a belief has been formed, it cannot be destroyed. In other words, there is nothing we can do that would cause one or more of our beliefs to cease to exist or to evaporate as if they never existed at all. This assertion is founded in a basic law of physics. According to Albert Einstein and others in the scientific community, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed, right? Being a science student, and I have done masters in science and particularly in physics, so I can relate to this part. Even if you have done like basic schooling up to 10th grade, then you can understand this very part, right? You don't need a master's degree for understanding this very easy concept. All right. If beliefs are energy, structured conscious energy that is aware of its existence, then this same principle of physics can be applied to beliefs, meaning if we try to eradicate them, it's not going to work. If you knew someone or something was trying to destroy you, how would you respond? You would defend yourself, fight back, and possibly become even stronger than you were before you knew or the threat. Each individual belief is a component of what we consider to be our identity. Isn't it responsible to expect that if threatened, each individual belief would respond in a way that was consistent with how all the parts respond collectively? The same principle holds true if we try to act as if a particularly troublesome belief doesn't exist. If you woke up one morning and everyone you knew ignored you and acted as if you didn't exist, how would you respond? It probably wouldn't be long before you grabbed someone and got right in their face to try to force them to acknowledge you. Again, if purposely ignored, each individual belief will act in the same very same way. It will find a way to force its presence into our conscious thought process or behavior. The easiest and most effective way to work with our beliefs is to gently render them inactive or non-functional by drawing the energy out of them. I call this process deactivation. After deactivation, the original structure of the beliefs remains intact, so technically it hasn't changed. The difference is that the belief no longer has any energy. Without energy, it doesn't have the potential to act as a force on your perception of information or on your behavior. Here is a personal illustration. As a young child, I was taught to believe in both Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. Okay, I'll have to write it down. Okay, great. Just give me 1 second and I'll be right back, man. Great. Okay. So, as a young child, I was taught to believe in both Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. In my mental system, both of these are perfect example of what are now inactive, non-functional beliefs. However, even though they are inactive, they still exist inside my mental system. Only now they exist as concept with no energy. If you recall from the last chapter, I defined belief as a combination of sensory experience and words that form an energized concept. The energy can be drawn out of the concept, but the concept itself remains intact in its original form. However, without energy, it has no effect on you, or it has no potential to act on my perception of information or my behavior or on my behavior. So as I'm sitting here typing into my computer, if someone came up to me and said that Santa Claus was at the door, how do you think I would define and interpret this information? I would treat it as being irrelevant or joke, of course. However, if I were 5 year old and my mother told me that Santa Claus was at the front door, her words would have instantly tapped me into a huge reservoir of positively charged energy that would have compelled me to jump up and run to the front door as fast as I could. Nothing would have been able to stop me. I would have overcome any obstacle in my path. At some point, my parents told me Santa Claus didn't exist. Of course, my first reaction was still disbelief. I didn't believe them, nor did I want to believe them. Eventually, they convinced me. However, the process of convincing me did not destroy my belief in Santa Claus or cause it not to exist any longer. It just took all the energy out of the belief. The belief was transformed into a non functional, inactive concept about how the world works. I'm not sure where all the energy went, but I know that some of it was transferred to a belief that Santa Claus doesn't exist. Now, I have two contradictory distinction about the nature of the word that exists in my mental system. One, Santa exists. Two, Santa doesn't exist. The difference between them is the amount of energy they contain. The first has virtually no energy, the second has energy. So, from a functional perspective, there is no contradiction or conflict. I propose that if it's possible to render one belief inactive, then it's possible to deactivate any belief, despite the fact that all beliefs seem to resist any force that would alter their present form. The secret to effectively changing our beliefs is in understanding and consequently believing that we really aren't changing our beliefs. We are simply transferring energy from one concept to another concept, one that we find more useful in helping us to fulfill our desires or to achieve our goals. Right. So we are just channelizing the energy from one form to another form, is basically what we are trying to do. Okay. Now, second one, all active beliefs demand expression. Beliefs fall into two basic categories, active and inactive. The distinction between the two is simple. Active beliefs are energized, they have energy to act as a force on our perception of information and on our behavior. And inactive belief is just the opposite. It is a belief that, for any number of reasons, no longer has energy or has so little energy that it's no longer able to act as a force on how we perceive information or how we express ourselves. When I say that all active beliefs demand expressions, I don't mean to imply that every belief in our mental environment is demanding to express itself simultaneously. For example, if I ask you to think about what's wrong with the word today, the word wrong would bring to your mind ideas about the nature of the world that reflect what you believe to be troubling or disturbing. Unless, of course, there is nothing about the state of the word you find troubling. The point is, if there is something you do believe is wrong, you weren't necessarily thinking about those ideas before I asked the question. But the moment I did, your belief about these issues instantly moved to the forefront of your conscious thinking process. In effect, they demanded to be heard. I say that beliefs demand to be expressed because once something causes up to tap into our beliefs, it seems as if we can't stop the flood of energy that's released. This is especially true of emotionally sensitive issues or beliefs we feel particularly passionate about. You might ask, why would I want to hold back expressing my beliefs? There would be several reasons. Consider a scenario in which is saying this person is saying something that you completely disagree with or even find utterly absurd. While you express your truth or hold back, will you express your truth or hold back? That will depend on the beliefs you have about proper in such a situation what is proper in such a situation. If your beliefs dictate that speaking up would be inappropriate and those beliefs have more energy than the ones that are being contradicted, then you'll probably hold back and not argue openly. You might be looking at this person, the boss, and nodding your head is in agreement, but in your mind, but is your mind in agreement? More to the point, is your mind silent? Absolutely not. Your position on the issue being presented are effectively countering each point the boss is making. In other words, your beliefs are still demanding expression, but they aren't being expressed externally in the environment because other beliefs are acting as a counteracting force. However, they will soon find a way to get out, won't they? As soon as you are out of the situation, you will probably find a way to unload or even spew out your side of the argument. You'll probably describe what you had to endure to anyone you think will lend a sympathetic ear. This is an example of how our belief demand to be expressed when they are in conflict with the external environment. But what happens when one or more of our beliefs are in conflict with our intents, goals, dreams, wants, or desires? The implication of such a conflict can have a profound effects on our trading. As we have already learned, beliefs create distinctions in how the external environment can express itself. Distinction by definitions are boundaries. Human consciousness, on the other hand, seems to be larger than the sum total of everything we have learned to believe. This larger than quality of human consciousness give us the ability to think in any direction we choose, either inside or outside the boundaries imposed by our beliefs. Thinking outside of the boundaries of our beliefs is commonly referred to as creative thinking. When we purposely chose to question a belief, question what we know, and sincerely desire an answer, we make our minds available to receive a brilliant idea, inspiration, or solution to the issue at hand. Creativity, by definition, brings forth something that didn't we will, by definition, automatically receive ideas or thoughts that are outside of anything that already exists in our rational mind as a belief or memory. As far as I know, there is no consensus among artists, inventors, or the religious or scientific communities as to exactly where creativity creatively generated information comes from. However, what I do know is that creativity seems to be limitless and without boundaries. If there are any limits on the ways we can think, we certainly haven't found them yet. Consider the staggering pace at which technology has developed in the last 50 years alone. Every invention or development in the evolution of humanity was born in the minds of people who were willing to think outside the boundaries dictated by what they had learned to believe. If all of us have the inherent ability to think creatively, and I believe that we do, then we also have the potential to encounter what I call as creative experience. I define a creative experience as the experience of anything new or outside the boundary imposed by our beliefs. It could be a new sight, something we have never seen before, but from the environment's perspective was always there. Or we could experience a new sound, smell, taste, or touch. Creative experiences like creative thoughts, inspirations, hunches, and brilliant ideas can occur as a surprise or can be the result of a conscious direction. In either case, when we experience them, we can be confronted with a major psychological dilemma. A creative occurrence, whether in the form of a thought or an experience, can cause us to be attracted to or desire something that is in direct conflict with one or more of our beliefs. To illustrate the point, let's return to the example of the dog and boy and dog. Recall that the boy has had several painful experiences with dogs. The first experience was real from the environment perspective. The others, however, were the result of how his mind processed information based on the operation of the association and pain avoidance mechanism. The end result is that he experiences fear every time he encounters a dog. Let's suppose that the boy was a toddler when he had his first negatively charged experience. As he grows up and begins associating specific words and concepts with his memories, he will form a belief about the nature of dogs. It would be reasonable to assume that he adopted a belief something like all dogs are dangerous. With the use of the word all, the boy's belief is structured in a way that assures that he will avoid all dogs. He has no reason to question this belief. That's why the concept of misandrist is also very common nowadays. Not so common, but yeah, a lot of women are opting it because here in this example, like we are saying that all dogs are dangerous. Similarly, they assume that all men are same, right? Generalization basically, and that is having an impact. And from next time onwards, they are not going to approach any other man, or if they will approach by other man, they will be very resistive in their nature for the very same idea, right? With the use of the word all, the boy's belief is structured in a way that assures that he will avoid all dogs. He has no reason to question this belief because every experience has confirmed and reinforced its validity. However, he and everyone else on the planet is susceptible to a creative experience. Under normal circumstances, the boy will do everything possible to make sure he does not encounter a dog. But what if something unexpected and unintended occurs? Suppose the boy is walking with his parents and as a result, feel safe and protected. Now, suppose he and his parents come to a blind corner and cannot see what is on the other side. They encounter a scene in which several children of about the same age as the boy are playing with some dogs, and furthermore, they are obviously having a great deal of fun. This is a creative experience. The boy is confronted with indisputable information that what he believes about the nature of dog isn't true. What happens now? First, the experience was not at the boy's conscious direction. He didn't make a decision to willingly expose himself to information that contradicted what he believed to be true. We might call this an inadvertent creative experience because the external environment forced him to confront other possibilities that he didn't believe existed. Second, the experience of seeing other children playing with dogs are not getting uh, hurt will throw his mind into a state of confusion. After the confusion wears off, meaning as he begins to accept the possibility that not all dogs are dangerous, several scenarios are possible. Seeing other children his own age with whom he could strongly identify having such a great time playing with dogs could cause the boy to decide that he wants to be like the other children and have fun with dogs too. If that's the case, the this inadvertent creative encounter has caused him to become attracted to express itself himself in a way that he formerly didn't believe was possible, interacting with dogs. In fact, the notion was so impossible that it wouldn't have even occurred to him to consider it. Now, he not only considers it, he desires it. Will he be able to express himself in a way that is consistent with his desire? The answer to this question is a matter of energy dynamics. There are two forces within the boy that are in direct conflict with each other, competing for expression: his belief that all dogs are dangerous, and his desires to have fun and be like the other children. What he will do the next time he encounters a dog will be determined by which has more energy, his belief or his desire. Given the intensity of the energy in his belief that all dogs are dangerous, we can reasonably assume that his belief will have far more energy than his desire. If that's the case, then he'll find his next encounter with a dog very frustrating, even though he may want to touch or pet the dog, he'll find that he can't interact with it in any way. The word all in this belief will act as paralyzing force, preventing him from fulfilling his desire. He might as well, he might be well aware of the fact that the dog he wants to pet is not dangerous and won't hurt him, but he won't be able to pet it until the balance of energy tips in favor of his desire. If the boy genuinely wants to interact with dogs, he'll have to overcome his fear. This means he'll have to deactivate his beliefs that all dogs are dangerous so he can properly install a belief about dogs that is more consistent with his desire. We know that dogs can express themselves in a wide range of ways, from loving and gentle to mean and nasty. However, very few dogs on a percentage basis fall into the mean and nasty category. A good belief for the boy to adopt then would be something like most dogs are friendly, but some can be mean and nasty. This belief would allow him to learn to recognize characteristics and behavior patterns that will tell him which dog he can play with and which ones to avoid. However, the larger issue is how can the boy deactivate the all in the belief that all dogs are dangerous so he can overcome his fear. Remember that all beliefs naturally resist any force that would alter their present form. But as I indicated above, the appropriate approach is not to try to alter the belief, but rather to draw the energy out of it and channel that energy into another belief that is better suited to your purpose. To deactivate the concept, the word all represents the boy will have to create a positively charged experience with the dog. At some point, he'll have to step through his fear and touch one. Doing this might require a great deal of effort on the boy's part over a considerable amount of time. Early in the process, his new realization about dogs might be strong enough only to allow him to be in the presence of dog at the distance and not run away. However, each encounter with a dog, even at a distance, that doesn't result in a negative outcome will draw more and more of the negative energy out of his belief that all dogs are dangerous. Eventually, each new positive experience will allow him to close the gap between himself and the dog little by little to the point that he can actually touch them. Now, from an energy dynamics perspective, he will be able to touch a dog when his desire to do so is at least 1 degree greater in intensity than his belief that all dogs are dangerous. The moment he actually does touch a dog, it'll have the effect of drawing most of the remaining negative energy out of the all concept and transfer it to a belief that reflects his new experience. Although it's probably not that common, there are people who for various reasons are motivated enough to purposely put themselves through the above described process. However, they may not be consciously aware of the dynamics involved. People who work through a childhood fear of this magnitude usually so somewhat haphazardly over a period of years without knowing for sure exactly how they did it unless they seek and get competent professional help. Later on, as adults, if they are asked or if they happen to encounter a situation that reminds them of their past, for instance, observing a child who is terrified of dogs, they typically characterize the process they went through as I remember when I was afraid of dogs, but I grew out of it. The end result of the first scenario was that the boy worked through his fear by deactivating his limiting belief about the nature of dogs. This allowed him to express himself in a way that he finds pleasing and that otherwise would have been impossible. The second scenario that could result from the child's inadvertent creative experience with dogs is that he isn't attracted to the possibility of playing with a dog. In other words, he could not care less about being like the other children or interacting with dogs. In this case, his beliefs that all dogs are dangerous and his new realization that all dogs are not dangerous will exist in his mental environment as contradictory concepts. This is an example of what I call an active contradiction. When two beliefs are in direct conflict with each other, both demanding expression. In this example, the first belief exists at a core level in the boy's mental environment with a great deal of negatively charged energy. The second belief is at more superficial level and has very little positively charged energy. The dynamics of this situation are interesting and extremely important. We have stated that beliefs control our perception of information. Under normal circumstances, the boy would have been perpetually blinded to the possibility of interacting with dogs, but the experience of seeing other children playing with them created a positively charged concept in his mental environment that dogs are not all dangerous. Some can be friendly. However, he hasn't done anything to deactivate the all in his belief that all dogs are dangerous. And as far as I know, beliefs have no capacity to deactivate themselves. As a result, beliefs exist in our mental system from the moment they are born to the moment we die. From the moment we are born, basically, or they are born to the moment we die, unless we consciously take step to deactivate them. However, okay, that is very important. Let me take a note of it. Okay, I'll be right back. All right. However, in this scenario, the boy has no desire and consequently no motivation to step through his fear. Therefore, the boy is left with an active contradiction when his minimally charged belief that not all dogs are dangerous given him the ability to perceive the possibility of playing with a dog. But this powerfully charged belief that all dogs are dangerous still cause him to experience some level of fear every time he encounters a dog, maybe not enough fear to cause him to run in terror because some of that fear will be offset by the other belief, but there will certainly be enough fear to cause a great deal of discomfort. The ability to see and consequently know that a situation is not dangerous, but at the same time find ourselves immobilized with fear can be quite baffling if we don't understand that what we discover as a result of thinking creatively or realize from an invertent creative experience doesn't necessarily have enough energy to become a dominant force in our mental environment. In other words, a new awareness or discovery could very well have enough energy to act as a credible force on our perception of information, thereby causing us to perceive possibility that would otherwise be invisible, but it might not have enough energy to act as a credible force on our behavior. In making this statement, I am operating out of the assumption that it takes more energy to act or express ourselves than the amount of energy it takes to observe something. On the other hand, new awareness and discoveries instantly and effortlessly become dominant forces if there's nothing inside us that's in conflict with them. But if there are conflicting beliefs and we aren't willing to deactivate the conflicting forces, expending some effort, especially if they are negatively charged, then acting on what we have discovered will be struggle at the very least and perhaps downright impossible. What I have just described is the psychological dilemma that virtually every trader has to resolve. Let's say you name a firm grasp of the nature of probabilities. Okay, let's read this para once again. Okay. On the other hand, new awareness and discoveries instantly and effortlessly become dominant forces if there's nothing inside us that's in conflict with them. But if there are conflicting beliefs and we aren't willing to deactivate the conflicting forces, expanding some effort, especially if they are negatively charged, then acting on what we have discovered will be struggle at the very least and perhaps downright impossible. When I have just described what I just have described is a psychological dilemma that virtually every trader has to resolve. Let's say you have a firm grasp of the nature of probabilities, and as a result, you know that the next trade is simply another trade in a series of trades that has probable outcome. Yet you find you're still afraid to put that next trade on, or you're still susceptible to several of the fear-based trading errors we have discussed in previous chapters. Remember that the underlying cause of fear is the potential to define and interpret market information as threatening. What is the source of our potential to interpret market information as threatening? Our expectation. But the market generates information that doesn't conform to what we expect. The up and down ticks seem to take on a threatening quality, become negatively charged. Consequently, we experience fear, stress, and anxiety. What is the underlying sources of our expectations? Our beliefs. In light of what you now understand about the nature of beliefs, if you're still experiencing negative state of mind when you trade, you can assume there is a conflict between what you know about probable outcomes and any number of other beliefs in your mental environment that are arguing, demanding expression for something else. Keep in mind that all active beliefs demand expression, even if we don't want them to. To think in probabilities, you have to believe that every moment in the market is unique, or more specifically, that every edge has a unique outcome. When you believe, when you believe at a functional level that every edge has a unique outcome, meaning that it's dominant belief without any other beliefs arguing for something different, you'll experience a state of mind that is free of fear, stress, and anxiety when you trade. It really can't work any other way. A unique outcome is not something we have already experienced. Therefore, it is not something we can already know. If it were known, it could not be defined as unique. When you believe that you don't know what is going to happen next, what exactly are you expecting from the market? If you said so, I don't know, you're absolutely right. If you believe that something will happen and that you don't need to know exactly what that something is to make money, then where's the potential to define and interpret market information as threatening and painful? If you said there is none, you're absolutely right again. Here's one more example of how beliefs demand expression. Let's look at a situation where a child's first encounter with a dog was a very positive experience. As a result, he has absolutely no problem interacting with dogs, any dog for that matter, because he has not encountered one that's unfriendly. Therefore, he has no concept and energized belief that it is possible for a dog to inflict any damage or cause him to experience pain. As he learns to associate words with his memory, he will probably acquire a belief about along the lines of all dogs are friendly and fun. Therefore, every time a dog comes into into his field of awareness, this belief will demand expression from the perspective of someone who will with a do. Okay, what will he do? It'll seem as if this child has an attitude of reckless abandon. If you try to convince the child that he'll get bitten someday if he doesn't exercise caution, his belief will cause him to need either discount or completely disregard your advice. His response would be something like, "No way," or it can't happen to me. Let's say at some point in his life, he approaches an unfamiliar dog that wants to be left alone. The dog growls, the warning will go unheeded, and the dog attacks the boy. From the perspective of the boy's belief system, he just had a creative experience. What effect will this experience have on his belief that all dogs are friendly? Will he now be afraid of all dogs as the child in the first example was? Unfortunately, the answer of these questions are not cut and dried, because there may be other beliefs also demanding expression that don't have anything specifically to do with dogs that come into play in a situation like this. For example, what if this child has a highly developed belief in betrayal? He believes he's been betrayed by some very significant people in some very significant situation that have caused him to experience intense emotional pain. If he associates the attack by this one dog as a betrayal by dogs in general, in essence, a betrayal of his belief in dogs, then he could easily find himself afraid of all dogs. All of the positive energy contained in his original belief could instantly be transformed into negatively charged energy. The boy could justify this shift with a rationalization like, if one dog can betray me, then any dog can. However, I do think this is an extreme and very unlikely occurrence. What is more likely is the word all in his original belief will instantly be deactivated, and that energy will get transformed to a new belief that better reflects the true nature of dogs. This new experience caused an energy shift that forced him to learn something about the nature of dogs that he otherwise refused to consider possible. His beliefs in the friendliness of dogs remains intact. He'll still play with dogs, but he'll now exercise some discretion by consciously looking for signs of friendliness or unfriendliness. I think that a fundamental truth about the nature of our existence is of every moment in the market, as well as in everyday life, has elements of what we know, similarities, and elements that we don't or can't know because we haven't experienced it yet. Until we actively train our mind to expect a unique outcome, we'll continue experiencing only what we know. Everything else, other information and possibility that are that are not consistent with what we know and expect will pass us by. Unperceived, discounted, distorted, outright denied, or attacked. When you truly believe that you don't need to know, you'll be thinking in probabilities, the market perspective, and will have no reason to block, discount, distort, deny, or attack anything the market is offering about its potential to move in any particular direction. If you're not experiencing the quality of mental freedom implied in that statement, and if it is your desire to do so, then you must take an active role in training your mind to believe in the uniqueness of each moment, and you must deactivate any of the belief that argues for something different. This process isn't any different from the one the boy in the first scenario went through, nor is it going to happen by itself. He wanted to interact with dogs without fear, but to do so, he had to create a new belief and deactivate the conflicting ones. This is the secret of achieving consistent success as a trader. Okay, so that means you have to change your beliefs. If you have any belief, so channelize, like belief that is not helpful in your journey to become successful, then all you have to do is deactivate it, or like get some energy out of it and channelize it to the belief that will help you to get the required result. Required result. Okay, beliefs keep on working regardless of what we are consciously aware of their existence, whether we are consciously aware of their existence in our mental environment. In other words, we don't have to actively remember or have conscious access to any particular belief for that belief to act as a force on any as a force on your perception of information or on our behavior. I know it's hard to believe that something we can't even remember can still have an impact on our lives, but when you think about it, much of what we learn throughout our lives is stored at an unconscious or subconscious level. Just give me 1 second. Let me take a note of it. Great. Moving ahead. If I asked you to remember each specific skill you had to learn so that you could drive a car with confidence, ch- sorry, chances are, okay, I think I am audible, right? Am I audible? Yes, I am audible. Okay. If I asked you to remember each specific skill had to learn so that you could drive a car with confidence, chances are you wouldn't remember all the things you needed to concentrate and focus on while you were in the process of learning. The first time I had the opportunity to teach a teenager how to drive, I was absolutely amazed at how much there was to learn, how much of the process I took for granted and no longer thought about at a conscious level. Possibly the best example that illustrates this characteristics is people who drive under the influence of alcohol. On any given day or night, there are probably thousands of people who have had so much to drink that they have no idea, that they have no conscious awareness of how they drove from point A to point B. It is difficult to imagine how it is possible unless you consider that drinking skills and and one's belief in his ability to drive operate automatically on a much deeper level than waking consciousness. Certainly, some percentage of these drunk drivers get into accidents, but when you compare the accident rate with the estimated number of people driving under the influence of alcohol, it's remarkable that there aren't great many more accidents. In fact, a drunk driver is probably most likely to cause an accident when he either falls asleep or something requires a conscious decision and a fast reaction. In other words, the driving conditions are such that that operating out of one's subconscious skills is not enough. Okay, self-evaluation and trading. How this characteristics applies to our trading is also quite profound. The trading environment offers us an arena of unlimited opportunities to accumulate wealth. But just because the money is available and we can perceive the possibility of getting it, that doesn't necessarily mean that we as individuals have an unlimited sense of self-valuation. In other words, there could be a huge gap between how much money we desired for ourselves, how much we perceive is available, and how much we actually believe we are worth or deserve. Okay, they all need to be in harmony with one another. Okay, just give me 1 second. Let me add a text box. This is the third slide right here. All right, everybody has a sense of self valuation. The easiest way to describe the sense is to list every active belief, both conscious and subconscious, that has the potential to argue either or against accumulating or achieving greater and greater levels of success and prosperity. Then match the energy from the positively charged beliefs against the energy from the negatively charged beliefs. If you have more positively charged energy arguing for success and prosperity than negatively charged energy arguing against them, then you have a positive sense of self valuation. Otherwise, you have a negative sense of self valuation. The dynamics of how these beliefs interact with one another is just nearly so simple as I am making it sound. In fact, it can be so complex that it could take years of sophisticated mental work to organize and sort out. What you need to know is that it's almost impossible to grow up in any social environment and not require some negatively charged beliefs that would argue against success or accumulating vast sums of money. Most of these self sabotaging beliefs have long been forgotten and operate at a subconscious level. But the fact that we may have forgotten them doesn't mean they have been deactivated. How do we acquire self sabotaging beliefs? Unfortunately, it's extremely easy. Probably the most common ways in is when a child engages in some activity that a parent or teacher doesn't want him to do, and the child accidentally injures himself. Many parents, to get their point across to the child, will respond to a situation like this by saying, "This, whatever pain you are experiencing, would have happened to you if you didn't deserved it." Wouldn't have happened to you if you didn't deserve it. You disobeyed me, and look what happened. God punished you. The problem with making or hearing statements like this is that there is a potential for the child to associate every future injury with these same statements and subsequently form a belief that he must be an unworthy person, undeserving of success, happiness, or love. Anything we feel guilty about can have an adverse effect on our self worth, right? Our sense of self worth. Just give me 1 second. Let's take a note of it, right? Just give me 1 second. We're almost at the end of this chapter, by the way, in case you are wondering. It's probably 1 or 2 pages. Usually, guilt is associated with being a bad person. Most people believe that bad people should be punished, certainly not rewarded. Some religions teach children that having a lot of money isn't godly or spiritual. Some people believe that making money in certain ways is wrong, even though it may be perfectly legal and moral from society's perspective. Again, you may not have a specific recollection of learning something that would argue against the success you perceive as possible, but that doesn't mean that what you learned is no longer having an effect. The way these subconscious self sabotaging beliefs manifest themselves in our trading is usually in the form of lapse in focus or concentration, resulting in any number of trading errors, like putting in a buy for a sell or vice versa, or allowing yourself to give into distracting thoughts that compel you to leave the screen only to find out when you return that you missed the big trade of the day. I've worked with many traders who achieved various levels of consistent success but found they just couldn't break through certain thresholds in acquiring equity. They discovered an invisible but very real barrier similar to the proverbial glass ceiling that many women executive experiences in the corporate world. Every time these traders hit the barrier, they experienced a significant drawdown. Okay, the corporate world. Okay, regardless of the market conditions. However, when asked about what happened, they typically blamed their sudden run of bad luck or on just that luck of the uh, various vagaries, luck or the vagaries of the market. All right. Is it a word or is it a mistyping? I'm not sure. Let me check it out. Okay, it is a word. Vagaries, unexpected change in a situation or person behavior that cannot be controlled or predicted. Okay, understood. Luck or the vagaries of the market. The sheer suddenness of the move, basically. If I'll quote I, Arnav Goswami. Okay. Interestingly, they typically created a steadily rising equity curve, sometimes over a period of several months, and the significant drawdown always occurred at the same spot in the equity curve. I described this psychological phenomena as being in a negative zone. As magically as money can flow into a trader's account when he is in the zone, it can just as easily flow out if he is in negative zone, where unresolved self-evaluation is who mysteriously act on the perception of information and behavior. I'm not implying here that you have to deactivate every belief that would argue against your ever expanding positive sense of self evaluation, because you don't, but you must be aware of the presence of such beliefs and take specific steps in your trading regimen to compensate when they start expressing themselves. Okay, so by this, we are coming to the end of chapter number 10, and today we understood about how exactly things work, belief system works, and how can we deactivate it. To some extent, we understood that. And in the next chapter, we are going to understand the action steps. Okay, so next chapter is chapter 11, thinking like a trader. So in case if you have come so far, thank you so much for being here. And if any suggestions, anything that you want to say, any comments, any appreciation, you are most welcome in the comment section. And we'll meet next time. Till then, thank you so much, universe. Thank you so much, Radharanji. Peace out.